Some mothers would die for their children. Seo-rin did. Yet death was not the end of her story. It was only the beginning. Long before kingdoms trembled at the sound of her name, and long before the king of the underworld himself came to speak it, Seo-rin was simply the daughter of a wealthy merchant. She was not born into nobility, nor was she destined to become a legendary warrior or blessed with divine powers. She was simply a kind young woman whose greatest strength had always been her compassion. Her father was one of the richest merchants in the empire, a man respected not only for his immense fortune, but also for the generosity with which he treated others. Although his caravans traveled across the empire and his warehouses overflowed with silk, tea, and precious goods, he never believed wealth alone made a person great. From the time Seo-rin was a child, he taught her that gold could build magnificent houses, but only kindness could build a family that would endure. When Seo-rin reached adulthood, she surprised everyone in the capital. Rather than accepting proposals from princes or influential noblemen, she chose to marry a young government official named Yi-jun. He possessed neither a famous family name nor great wealth. All he had was quiet determination, unwavering honesty, and the dream of serving the empire with honor. Many people questioned her decision and quietly mocked it behind closed doors. Her father, however, never doubted his daughter's judgment. He simply smiled, believing that character would always outweigh status. On the day of their wedding, he presented Seo-rin with an extraordinary dowry that included merchant caravans, warehouses, tea houses, thriving silk businesses, fertile farmland, and enough silver to support generations of descendants. To the outside world, it appeared that Yi-jun had married into unimaginable wealth. Seo-rin never allowed anyone to describe it that way. Whenever people praised their growing fortune, she gently corrected them, insisting that everything they achieved belonged to both of them. Together, they worked tirelessly, transforming what had once been a modest household into one of the wealthiest and most respected families in the capital. As the years passed, Yi-jun steadily climbed the ranks of the imperial court. Every promotion earned him greater respect, and every successful investment expanded their prosperity. Before long, ministers sought his advice. Merchants competed for the opportunity to work with him, and even ancient noble families began requesting invitations to his banquets. To everyone looking from the outside, they appeared to have the perfect life. Then heaven blessed them with a daughter. They named her Yunha, and from the moment she was born, she became the light that filled their home. She inherited her mother's gentle heart and her father's sharp mind, greeting everyone she met with the same bright smile, whether they wore embroidered silk robes or simple cotton garments. Servants adored her because she never treated anyone as beneath her. Every evening after the day's work had ended, Seo-rin would sit beneath the cherry tree in their courtyard and gently brush Yunha's long black hair while singing the same lullaby her own mother had once sung to her. Sometimes Yi-jun would join them, laughing as little Yunha chased butterflies through the drifting cherry blossoms, her joyful laughter echoing across the garden. Those peaceful evenings became Seo-rin's greatest treasure. She believed with all her heart that they would last forever. She was wrong. Ambition rarely transforms a person overnight. Instead, it changes them so gradually that they often fail to notice the difference until the person they once were has quietly disappeared. As Yi-jun rose higher within the imperial court, he found himself surrounded by powerful nobles whose family names stretched back for centuries. They praised his intelligence, admired his accomplishments, and welcomed him into their gatherings with courteous smiles. Yet beneath those smiles came whispered words that slowly found their way into his thoughts. A remarkable man, for someone living on his wife's fortune. His title may be earned, but his estate belongs to his father-in-law. Without that merchant's dowry, where would he be today? At first, Yi-jun dismissed the remarks as meaningless jealousy. However, once those words had settled into his mind, they refused to leave. Night after night, while the rest of the household slept peacefully, he lay awake remembering every insult until they became impossible to ignore. Gradually, the fortune that had once felt like a blessing began to feel like a burden. Instead of seeing gratitude, he saw dependence. Instead of seeing love, he saw the shadow of another man's wealth hanging over every achievement he had earned. The change was so subtle that even he failed to recognize it. One afternoon, as Yi-jun returned from the palace, an elderly minister placed a hand upon his shoulder and slowed his pace. The old noble wore the calm smile of a man who had spent decades navigating the politics of the imperial court, and he spoke as though he were offering nothing more than friendly advice. He remarked that no official truly entered the highest circles of power until he embraced the traditions of the old aristocratic families. Wealth and talent could earn a man recognition, but true acceptance required something more. Then, almost as an afterthought, he added that every great official maintained a proper household, one with a respected wife, and at least one concubine. Yi-jun laughed politely and dismissed the comment with courteous words. Even so, the conversation lingered in his thoughts long after he had left the palace. Several days later, he found himself sitting alone beneath the cherry tree where he and Seo-rin had once exchanged promises of lifelong devotion. It was the very place where he had vowed she would forever remain his one and only wife. Cherry blossoms drifted gently through the evening air, just as they had on the day of their wedding. Nothing around him had changed, only the thoughts within his heart were different. When Seo-rin joined him that evening, she noticed the change immediately. The warmth that had always lived in his eyes had faded, replaced by a distance she had never seen before. Even the smile he offered her seemed forced. As though it no longer reached his heart, she sat quietly beside him before asking, in her usual gentle voice, what was troubling him. Yi-jun remained silent for a long time. At last, he admitted that the expectations of the imperial court were different from what he had once believed. According to the nobles, wealth alone could never earn genuine respect. If he truly wished to stand among the empire's greatest families, he needed more than money. He wanted status. He wanted influence. He wanted a name that history would remember alongside the oldest noble houses. Seo-rin listened without interrupting. When he had finished speaking, she gently reminded him of the promise they had made beneath that very cherry tree years ago. They already possessed everything most people spent an entire lifetime searching for. They had a loving family, honest work, a peaceful home, and more wealth than they could ever hope to spend. Then she asked him a simple question. Why chase a dream that would cost them the happiness they already possessed? June lowered his eyes, unable to meet her gaze. For several long moments, neither of them spoke. Finally, he broke the silence. Money without status, he said quietly, meant nothing. He confessed that he had grown tired of hearing people remember him only as the man who had risen because of his wife's fortune. He no longer wanted to live beneath the shadow of another family's wealth. He wanted history to remember his own name and his own achievements. As Seo-rin listened, she felt something deep inside her quietly begin to break. It was not because her husband longed for greater success. She had always supported his dreams. What frightened her was the realization that, for the first time since they had met, his ambition had become greater than his gratitude. Without saying another word, her eyes wandered across the courtyard until they rested upon little Eunha. Their daughter was happily gathering fallen cherry blossoms into the folds of her tiny sleeves, smiling as though the world held nothing but beauty. She had no idea that the peaceful childhood she treasured was already beginning to slip away. Seo-rin reached out one final time and gently took Yi-jun's hand into her own. In a voice filled with quiet sorrow, she reminded him that some dreams demanded far too great a price. Yi-jun hesitated. Then, with slow and deliberate movement, he gently withdrew his hand from hers. It was such a small gesture that neither of them fully understood its meaning. Yet in that silent moment, beneath the falling blossoms that had witnessed both their vows and their happiness, the perfect family they had built together quietly came to an end. Only a few days later, a beautiful young woman named Mion would pass through the gates of the Yi estate. Her arrival would bring betrayal. It would bring bloodshed. And before long, it would set into motion a wager so great that it would shake heaven, the earth, and the underworld itself.